You know, hiding in plain sight right at the US-Canada border, there's a high-stakes economic and environmental conflict being waged literally every single day. And it's not about oil or timber. It's about trash. This is the story of how millions of tons of garbage became a pawn in a geopolitical game.
Okay, so it all starts with this one tiny number, 36 cents. That's the fee, the so-called tipping fee, to dump 1 ton of trash in a Michigan landfill. Now look at that compared to the regional average of over $5. That isn't just a price gap, no. That's a powerful economic magnet, pulling millions of tons of waste right across an international border.
And this gets us to what you could really call the 36-cent anomaly. Michigan's incredibly low fee creates this almost irresistible pull for waste haulers in Ontario, where, disposal costs are just vastly higher. It makes so much more sense for them to just drive their cargo south.
Now logically, you'd think, well, let's just close this loophole. And there was a big push to do exactly that, a proposal to raise the fee up to $5 and finally level the playing field. But it was shot down. It got stuck in a legislative stalemate, with business groups worrying about rising costs. So that 36-cent magnet, it's still on, and it's at full power.
And the scale of this whole thing is it's staggering. We are talking about nearly 3.5 million tons of waste flowing from Ontario into the US every single year. To put that in perspective, that's over a quarter of all the trash the entire province generates. This isn't just a few trucks, it's a massive organized pipeline built entirely on that 36-cent fee. But of course, this massive flow of trash was about to run headfirst into a political wall. A really powerful U.S. tariff, one designed to protect national security, threatened to make the entire business model completely uneconomical, basically overnight.
The weapon of choice here was something called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. This law allowed for a huge blanket 35% tariff on foreign goods. Now, it wasn't aimed specifically at trash, but any foreign good crossing the border was a target. And suddenly, that put millions of tons of Canadian waste directly in the crosshairs. So this massive tariff wall goes up. Game over, right? Well, this is where the story gets really clever. International trade law, of all things, provided a perfect, almost custom-built shield. The fine print in a huge trade deal created a loophole big enough to drive millions of tons of trash right through that wall.
So you end up with this direct clash of laws. On one side, you've got this powerful 35% tariff targeting all foreign goods. But on the other, you have the new US-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement, the USMCA, which clearly states that originating goods from Canada are exempt. So the entire game came down to one simple question. Is Canadian trash considered a Canadian good?
And the answer, which you'd find buried deep in trade law, is a resounding yes. Under the USMCA, any waste and scrap that's collected in Canada is legally classified as a wholly obtained good. This is the key that unlocks everything. It means that, for the purposes of trade, Canadian trash is treated just like a Canadian-made product, giving it a free pass right around that 35% tariff.
Of course, you're probably thinking, okay, but what about all the foreign-made stuff in that trash, right? Like an old TV from Japan or a plastic toy from China. Well, the trade deal actually has an answer for that too. It's called the de minimis rule, and it basically provides a 10% buffer. So, as long as the value of all the non-Canadian items in a shipment stays below that threshold, the entire load still gets to count as Canadian.
But just when it seemed like this clever legal loophole had settled the whole matter, the entire game board was flipped upside down. A bombshell decision from the U.S. Supreme Court didn't just challenge the tariff, it completely wiped out the legal foundation it was built on. And the path to this ruling was incredibly fast. Legal challenges against using IEEPA for tariffs were filed all through 2025. By late that year, a key case, Learning Resources, Inc. v. Trump, landed at the Supreme Court. And then, on February 20th, 2026, the court delivered its landmark verdict. At the heart of the decision, really, was a simple separation of powers. The court found that while IEEPA grants broad emergency powers, the specific power to set tariffs belongs to Congress. The administration had overstepped its authority. And just like that, poof, the 35% tariff wall just vanished. But the trade war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That very same day, the administration pivoted. From the legal rubble of the old tariff, a whole new strategy emerged, this time based on a different, more traditional piece of trade law. And you can see the pivot perfectly here. The justification shifted from a vague national emergency to a much more technical balance of payments deficit.
The new tool called Section 122 was way more limited, a maximum rate of 15% and a hard time limit of 150 days. I mean, that's a far cry from the old indefinite, i.e. EPA tariffs.
So, a new 10% global tariff was put in place. But, and this is the crucial detail for our story, the new order explicitly maintained the exemptions for USMCA partners. The weapon had changed, but the shield for Canadian trash? It was still perfectly intact. The flow could continue.
Okay, so after all of that legal and economic back and forth, let's bring it back to the real world. Why does this whole fight over trash matter so much? Because for Ontario, this cross-border trade isn't just a convenience, it's a critical pressure release valve for a system that is rapidly running out of time. Here are the stakes, plain and simple. With the U.S. border open, allowing those millions of tons to be exported, Ontario's own landfills are projected to last until about 2037. But what if that border were to slam shut, either because of new tariffs or some other political fight? All that waste comes flooding back home. And the result? Landfill capacity is completely exhausted 3 years earlier, by 2034.
3 years. That's the cost of a border closure. Ontario would instantly lose 3 years of breathing room to solve its long-term waste problem. So this trade dispute, it's not abstract at all. It's about a very real and very fast-approaching environmental cliff.
And that leaves us with the final, pretty unsettling question. The legal battles and the economic games will keep evolving, but the physical reality doesn't change. Ontario's landfills are on a ticking clock, and its reliance on a neighbor's cheap dumping ground has become a serious vulnerability. So if that gate ever closes for good, where is it all going to go?